Right. We're going to go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I want to say good evening and thank you for taking the time to join us for this important community meeting regarding the proposed fire assessment. My name is Jennifer Donavedian, Administrative Services Manager with Groveland Community Services District. We appreciate your presence here tonight. The topic before us is a significant one, and your participation in understanding it is both valued and essential. I would like to begin by briefly outlining the structure of this evening's meeting to ensure a clear and productive process. Tonight's focus is the presentation of the proposed fire benefit assessment. GCSD General Manager Pete Campo will open the presentation, after which he will turn it over to Melanie Lee with SCI Consulting Group, who will walk through the details, methodology, and framework of the assessment. In order to allow the presentation to be delivered in full without interruption, we will not be taking questions during this portion. We will, however, have a dedicated question and answer period at the conclusion of the presentation where we welcome your questions and engagement. Also joining us this evening are CAL FIRE Assistant Chief Nathan Gorin and John Keeper with Keeper's Insurance Agency, who will also be available to address questions related to fire operations and homeowners insurance. With that, I will now turn it over to GCSD General Manager Pete Campo.
Well, I see the danger in front of me here going over the wire.
Your presentation right
Okay. There's two microphones. So again, good evening and thank you for being here. This the turnout really shows that this community cares about fire protection. It's extremely important, and I think this really shows that the public wants to know about the decisions that are in front of them. You know, it's when you call 911, what matters is simple. If someone shows up, they're trained, they're quick, and they're ready to make a difference. That's what it's all about, and that's what we have to plan for. And that's what fire protection really is being able to rely on that engine, that resource, whatever it is, to show up when you hit 911, because that seems like a really long time from the minute you dial until the minute they show up, even if it's just a couple minutes. As your community services district, we were formed to plan for the future. That's what we do. Our mission is really simple. We provide services. We don't have all of the other stuff we have to think about, and fire protection is the most important service that we provide. It's our job to plan for the future, to make sure that the service is reliable, properly staffed, and capable, not just today, but into the future. That's a hard thing to grasp, is that I don't think any of us can envision a future when a fire engine is not needed. I don't see a time when fires are going to put themselves out automatically in every situation, or that someone can be saved when they're in a crunched vehicle. And that's something that they have to show up. Their tools have to work. They've got to be trained in it, and nothing worse than something breaking down when you're on the way. The Community Services District was formed to provide the services that you need locally, to have services under local control at a level that you expect. Local control meaning that you elect the board of directors that governs the CSD, and the elected directors hire management, and management is responsible for the day-to-day affairs. But we've done an extensive job in financial planning for the fire department. And again, your decisions locally are made by this elected board of directors for the Groveland CSD. Fire service has long been provided in the community through our partnership with CAL FIRE. We've dedicated staffing at Station 78, for those who aren't familiar. That's the big building on Main Street with multiple doors in front. That station was built in the 70s and served ever since. And again, since 2014, we've had the contractual relationship with Cal Fire that we'll talk more about. We've had that relationship, but the environment has changed. Costs are rising faster than revenues. And Cal Fire also now requires a 3-person crew. Right now we have what's called 2-0 staffing, which means when that engine rolls out of the bay, there's 2 people on it, a minimum of 2 people. It's considered a minimum level of staffing just for safety purposes. If you can imagine a single person in an engine responding to any situation, they can't even control the traffic. They can't even, get out safely and get around. But 2 people is an absolute minimum. Cal Fire is transitioning to a 3-0 staffing. And that means 3 people on that engine. So when that engine rolls out of the bay, it's got 3 people. That leaves more people to do a lot more things. You'd be amazed at what the difference is between 2 and 3. Now that's a Cal Fire contractual requirement. Again, we contract. The board of directors of the district sets a budget, and we contract with Cal Fire to provide the staffing for that service. The 3-person crew is a safety and operational requirement. We're also facing equipment needs, including replacement of aging fire engines with higher costs and longer lead times. To purchase an engine prior to 2020, you could expect between $750,000 and $1 million for a fire engine, a structural firefighting engine, type 1 engine. Now it's about 1.3 to 1.5 for that same exact engine. And what you used to be able to get pretty much off the shelf delivered within a year now takes 3 to 4 years to have delivered. Our youngest frontline engine, the one that has to work every single time that 911 alarm goes off, is 17 years old now. So that means if we ordered the fire engine today, it would be 21 years old when the fire engine was delivered. So in looking at the financial future over the next 15 years, we extensively looked at revenue and expenses, and we'll talk graphically about that in a minute. And we've identified a gap between current revenues and long-term services. Now, we can survive for a year, maybe 18 months. Cal Fire bills us on a quarterly basis. But at that point in time, that's assuming that we have absolutely no major equipment breakdowns, no major failure in the equipment at the station. And also assumes that we come in under budget on everything, or right at budget. 18 months is not a lot of time. We don't have the money to take out a loan to be able to replace a fire engine. So that was taken into consideration to take out a loan to get a fire engine in our financial future. And to replace that engine on a schedule up to 20 years, between 10 and 20 years. It's not like your normal car that's in the garage or in your front yard. It is a very complex piece of machinery with pumps and alarms and switches and valves and bells and electronics and communication equipment and everything that's needed for them to be able to roll up, hook up to fire hydrants, hook up to water supply, draw from this, pressurize the equipment, roll out hoses, and do whatever they need to do, carry their extraction equipment to cut cars open and things like that. So we looked at the revenue, we've looked at the expenses over the long term, we've identified that gap. Under California law, addressing that gap between our expenses and our revenue requires a Prop 218 process. If many of you would remember Prop 218, we'll talk more about that. That was approved by the voters in 1986, and that requires that Californians have the right to vote on taxes. They have the right to vote on assessments. They have a process where fees are approved. And so it's a process where property owners decide for this type of funding. For funding for these types of services, the property owners decide. This is not a tax imposed by the board. This is a ballot process. We'll talk much more about that here. The ballots will be mailed in early May, and property owners will decide whether to support fire suppression fire suppression assessment. Tonight, our role is simple. We're here to provide clear, factual information. We're not advocating. We can't advocate. We're simply providing the information that we've gathered and put together with professionals and with our professional expertise so that you can make an informed decision. That's what's important, is that we give you what you need to make your decision when you do receive a ballot. Ultimately, the decision will shape the level of protection this community relies on in moments when it matters the most. That's the most important point to understand in this, is that we feel we know how to plan for the future, we financially plan for the future, and now we're letting the public decide on how that goes. So we have our consultant here, but I'm going to jump into that. That was just my opening. So we've got a number of slides here, but it won't take us long to get through it, I promise. So what's on the agenda this evening is obviously about the fire protection emergency response assessment in Groveland. And we're going to discuss who we are. We've talked a little bit about our district and the relationship with CAL FIRE. Thank you. My voice usually carries, but this room sucks it up quickly. We're going to talk about the challenge. We've talked a little bit about the financial challenge. We're going to get into a little bit more detail. Our consultant, municipal finance professional, will talk about the Proposition 218 process, and then exactly what it funds, because this is a very special process under law where the assessments have to go specifically to a specified purpose and can't be used for anything else. And how the rates are set, how they evaluated the benefit, the level of special benefit received by each property, and then also the ballot, because that would be the next thing that you see in May. The agenda, right? Oh, I was on it. Okay. So again, I'm not going to belabor this. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I want to make sure we have a clear understanding. So in the district fire department was formed in 1973, and we service about a 15 square mile area. And the next slide will go over the boundaries, because there's been a lot of questions about where's GCSD's boundaries, what do they serve? We've got a very specific boundary that was established by law. That's our area of responsibility. We receive property tax dollars from properties within those boundaries, and that's our primary focus area for fire protection services. We have the single station 78 in Groveland. We own and maintain the station, the engines, and all of the equipment in that station. Everything from breathing air equipment to extraction equipment to first aid supplies to jacks and things to hold vehicles to everything else that's a piece of equipment in that station. We respond to structure fires, wildfires, vehicle crashes, medical emergencies, and hazmat calls on a continuous basis as needed when the calls come in. We pay GCSD through its property tax funding, pays for the staffing provided by CAL FIRE. Again, contracted with CAL FIRE as the fire department. And an important thing to understand is the takeaway is GCSD is solely dedicated to fire protection within the district boundaries. That's where we have to, we do plan beyond our boundaries in the event that there's some growth outside of our boundaries that we're going to provide service to as the first engine. But our primary focus is within those district boundaries. Any growth, any changes in service needs, any of that, that's why we're here. So the CAL FIRE partnership, we have a Schedule A contract. Those are provisions in law for us to be able to have that contract with CAL FIRE. And it's amazing. They have extensive staff, very, very good training. They handle all the HR, they handle all the workers' comp, they handle all the retirement. Everything is on them, which is from a management and cost predictability perspective is extremely good for the CSD and for the community. and they're very, very well trained and deeply staffed. Current crew is we have one captain and one engineer on every response. And that's the 2O staffing, captain and engineer. The required crew is going to change, and that was adopted by CAL FIRE in November of 2024, moving to a captain, an engineer, and a firefighter, 3O staffing. And that meets national fire protection standards, and it also meets Caltrans's contracting requirements to go to the 3O staffing. As you can imagine, having a third person on the engine makes all the difference. Without this contract, Groveland has no dedicated fire coverage within its district boundaries. Okay, that's the so hopefully that relationship is very clear. Okay. Not the most perfect map. You're not going to be able to see your street. You can get a copy of this map in the district office. It's available online. You can zoom in. You still can't see your street. However, the red line is the boundary. So we extend to the far end of Big Oak Flat just before the grade. Goes up and around, mostly encompasses Pine Mountain Lake. And then down on the far right-hand side, that little jagged edge is property that was annexed into the district in the 1980s to provide water service from the Big Creek facility, which is down at the far right lower end there. And then extend down to some large parcels, most of them via BLM and Forest Service parcels on this end of the district. So that's what's called the statutory boundaries of GCSD. That's where we're responsible primarily to provide service. And this assessment only applies if it's approved to those within that boundary. Okay. So the new CAL FIRE requirement, they talked about that being is updated. Updated in November of 2024. It goes to a shorter work week for the employees because they're on duty 24 hours a day for their shift. And so it goes to 3O staffing. We don't have the authority to override it. We can't continue the contract at the 2O staffing in perpetuity. We can't say we choose 2O instead of 3O. That's not supported into the future. So we're going to have to go to the 3O staffing. That was one of the things that really triggered our need to really look closely at the finances and our ability to be able to fund that in the future. Again, the 2O staffing is a very minimal staffing. We've done really good because we do rely on other neighboring entities, other entities in the area. We do have a county fire engine that is co-located within the GCSD Station 78. That was the result of a cooperative effort between GCSD and the county to get that engine to locate there. It's been a year-to-year agreement. They initially had it under a grant-funded contract. They got what's called a SAFER grant to increase staffing because there was a real need to increase staffing here. Fast response equals small fires put out quickly. The dilemma is that funding ran out, so now the county is working to backfill that to be able to provide that engine in Groveland. At least, for now, it's co-located with our engine, and they pay their share of the cost for utilities and heating and those types of things. So it's really a good arrangement, and that was an effort that's made a lot of difference because that puts 4 people on fire. We're independently contracted with CAL FIRE, so ultimately we will be at a 3O and they will be at a 3O staffing. So if that co-location continues, that would be 6 people, 2 engines or 3 people each rolling out of there. The county's primary responsibility is outside of that boundary that I showed you. And the GCSD responsibility is within that boundary. So they do a little bit of fancy maneuvering when they get to, when the alarm goes off, depending on where it is, they'll dispatch the primary engine. If it's a fire, the standard is everybody's going. If it's a lift assist in the district boundaries, it'll be the district engine if it's available. It's the closest resource to it, to the emergency. If it's outside the district boundaries and it's a lift assist or something like that, a minor medical issue, then the county engine will roll and the district engine will be ready to backfill wherever. So it's a great symbiotic relationship. The 3O staffing outcomes is obviously firefighter safety. They just, by OSHA regulations, they can't go into a burning building with just 2 people. 3 people make it easier to address the fire and get it under control and make rescues. If there's somebody potentially in the building where there's 2 people outside, another person can go in, or 2 go in and 1 is watching. And Chief Gorham can answer your questions on that at a later time. But that is extremely important for safety and also for faster, more effective response. We did a master plan in 2020, master plan update. And in reality, when you have a structure fire, you need a minimum of 9, an optimal of 14 people. So even with 2 3O staff engines, we still have to wait for the Merrill Road Police Station CAL FIRE engine to show up if they are in town, if they are available and not on a state mission somewhere else, or from resources to come from potentially Mariposa or even as far as Jamestown on a major fire. So you'll see them roll in fast, and then more engines roll in over time on something like that. But the 3O staffing really gets us a long way down the road. And the sustained CAL FIRE coverage, because for us to continue our Schedule A contract with CAL FIRE, we have to go to the 3O staffing. So it's safety, it's operations, and it's contractual requirement. So the last slide for me at this point, and you'll be done with me, is portrays the graph that has been the subject of the most discussion. It's really easy for us to predict that bottom line. That's our revenue. That's the primary and nearly only source of revenue that we have. That's a portion of your property tax dollars. All of the properties within that district boundaries, not outside, just within that boundaries. A portion of that comes back to the district, and that is allocated to the fire department. That's a reliable only source of funding. It increases by 2 to 3% a year based on property values and property sales. It's restricted primarily by Proposition 13 from the late 1970s. On the expense side, which is the upper line, you can see that we have a gap. We have a gap even this year. If we come in at budget, we're already going to draw from any money that we have in the bank and draw that down. And we've done a good job of budgeting over the last 5 years to be able to build enough to be able to make it for the next couple of years if we don't go to the 3O staffing, but we're contractually required to do that. So this graph shows predicting the 3O staffing. It actually starts in 27, 28. But the first year is proposed to be a staffing reserve. In other words, we charge the amount to be able to put the first year in reserve for staffing. And again, those are allocated separately. They're accounted for separately and will be displayed separately, so you can always see that. And then we see the continual climb as that 3O staffing is implemented over a period of time to full staffing by the next year. And then at that point, the contract amount goes up by 5% a year. Okay. So if you think about the fact that our revenue just goes up 2 to 3%, and even just the CAL FIRE contract goes up by 5%, the gap gets wider each year, where we predict out by 2030, 31, we're facing a $2 million gap. Obviously, when you do the math, we're going to be out of money within a couple of years without a change in revenue. So that is when we decided to go through the process of introducing to our
Do you need a
board.
tray? Because I can hear you're done.
Sorry. It could be. But that is, that threw me off a little bit. Anyway, I think I've explained it enough. We have, we have expenses that are going to exceed revenue, and that's the reason that we're here. Again, back to the very beginning of the discussion, we're here to plan for the future. We see a problem, a financial problem in the future. We were charged, the board is elected, the district management is charged with bringing a plan to close that gap. We've brought that to the board. They preliminarily approved proceeding with an assessment ballot, and that's the next step. And I'll turn it over to our municipal finance commissioner, Melanie Lee, with SEI Consulting.
Questions? No question, go to you.
At the end of the presentation, we're going to go back.
Good afternoon, can everyone hear me? Okay, so before we go on to the next slide, let me just make sure I'm doing this right. Okay, so my name is Melanie Lee. I'm a consultant with SCI Consulting Group. We work with public agencies all up and down the state, and at some point in time, the state itself. And what we do is we work on revenue measures. And it's basically what we have here is one of them is called Prop 218. And so just to give you a little bit of background is that most of the time that when people call our company or public agencies call our company, it's not for good news. They contact us because there are needs that they need for their community. And so we work with them on the best measure to be able to raise funds where we ask property owners or registered voters if they are willing to pay for these additional services. There's a handful of similar companies in the state, but it's very niche. And I always say that I would actually really like to be able to work myself out of a job. This is not an easy task. It is not easy for public agents to be able to go to their constituents and ask them to be able to pay more money for essential services. So before we get into Prop 218, I just want to talk a little bit about what Pete said about Prop 13. So does everybody here know what Prop 13 is? Okay, so Prop 13, so that was passed by, or it was sponsored by Howard Jarvis and Paul Gane in 1978. And at the time, property taxes were raising at an excessive rate. And they felt that something needed to be done to be able to protect property owners. So they put on the ballot the opportunity for property owners to say, hey, what we would like to do is when you purchase your home, you pay 1% of the purchase of the cost of the purchase of your property. And then that every time after that, it can only go up 2%. Okay. Well, ultimately, what that did is it did affect a lot of public agencies who are also depending on that revenue. So in the meantime, public agencies had to look for a different way to be able to raise funds for their services. And as I mentioned, there are different ways. And it got to a point where it only took sometimes in some instances for a board of 5 board members, only 3 had to approve a revenue measure and the other 3. So when Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association came back and said, we want additional protections for our property owners. And on the ballot, they put a Proposition 218, which is the Right to Vote on Taxes Act. And it was approved in 1996 and it started in 1997. And what it did is it laid out specific guidelines that public agencies, if they wanted to raise the revenue, different ways that guidelines that they had to follow. It's been since 1996, and over the years they have had litigations and other changes that have been able to help us dial in to the specific needs of what better serves Prop 218. One of the things about Proposition 218, and for this assessment, it's an assessment, it's not a tax. And the reason that I state that is because a tax is done by registered voters, The benefit assessment is for property owners. I'm gonna look back there, I apologize, I don't have my glasses on, it was a bad mistake, but I should be able to read it. Okay, so one thing that we ultimately have to do is, it is important for us to be able to work with the public agency and to figure out the amount of funds that is needed. And so when we look and we worked with the district, we looked at a 5, 10, 15-year budget, but we'll talk today about the 5-year. One other important thing about the Proposition 218 is if it is approved, all of the funds must go into a specific account where it is just spent on the information that will be voted on by the property owners. So what is a weighted ballot? So what is a weighted ballot is what all of you will see. So we approved the engineer's report. The engineer's report is a document by Proposition 218 that has to go through and it has to identify what is the special benefit and the services that are above and beyond what is currently being offered by the district. It also looks at how much the funds are needed. And then we look at the demographics, meaning the different property types that are within the district. And from that, we have to, we start with what we call one SFE, meaning what is the equivalent of one single family equivalent. And then it changes, if you have a vacant property, that amount will be different. And then if you have a commercial property, that amount is different because different property types have different fire statistics that we look at. So in this case, what is a weighted ballot? The weighted ballot is that if you have a single family home, for example, you would probably, in this particular instance, you would get a ballot for $100 because the proposed assessment will be asking you to pay $100 annually. For a larger commercial building, that commercial building would be asking you to pay approximately $500 annually, and then the vacant lot is different because it doesn't have the same level of special benefit as a single family home or a commercial property. So it would only be paying $50. And one other thing to, so I just want to also explain that in the engineer's report, this is it's very legally, so it's not very comfortable reading, but definitely go ahead and do so. It lays out the particular things that we have to look for. One of it being, and this goes back to Prop 218, this idea of special versus general benefit. Special benefit is what are the property owners receiving in this district that is special to them, that is not equal to anyone else. So there is the concept is also for general benefit. So if there's somebody who lives outside the district who is driving through, who is spending time here, but has to use the services for the fire district, then we have to quantify that amount of general benefit, and those funds cannot be paid by the assessment. It has to come from a different source of revenue. So the amount that, when you get the ballot, the amount that is on the ballot will be the amount that is on, that you're being asked to vote on, that is the amount that you're being asked to pay. And again, I apologize for not having my glasses, but if you have a larger amount, so you have a commercial property, then you will be asked to, you will have more votes than the single family home who is paying a different rate. So your amount of votes that is on that ballot, that dollar amount, is how many votes you are getting. So the vacant parcel would only get $50 worth of votes. The commercial property would get $500 worth of votes. And the small home would get $100 worth of votes. And again, these are property owners. So if you are a registered voter and you do not live within, if you are a registered voter but you do not own property in Groveland within a district, you do not get to vote on this. These are strictly for property owners who own property here. So what does the assessment pay for? As you can see here, 53.4% is the Schedule 8 contract. And then there's this 3.0 staffing reserve. So over time, what's going to happen over the next 5 years as they implement the 3.0, that 14% will get lower and lower and lower, and that red piece of the pie will start to get larger, larger and larger. Because that reserve is holding space for when that budget starts to increase. The rest is done with, as Pete mentioned, equipment and apparatus. As he mentioned, the youngest engine that they have is about 17 years old. And then there's also operating expenses, and there's fuel and utilities. So again, how is your assessment calculated? So going back to this idea of general versus special benefit. So we always start off with the one SFE for a single family home. And when we look at fire statistics that we receive for the NFPA, and then we also look at what the average structural value for those properties are. And that is based on the property type and the value. And so that gives us the first step in what we start to see, what we call a single family equivalent. And then after that, there's additional special benefit components that we look at. One being the fire hazard zone. So the majority of parcels in Groveland are in the very high severity zone. And if there were some that were, let's say you had properties that were in multiple zones, we have different factors for each one. So we multiply those factors together so we can start getting what these affected SFEs are. The other thing that we look at is the distance from the fire station. So again, the special benefit. If you are closer to the fire district, you would be paying a lower amount than someone who, in a single family home, than someone who lives farther away. So here are the examples of the special benefit properties. You can see the lower special benefit when we look at the fire risk factors. So both are very in the very high fire category. And then the replacement values could be very similar. And both of them are in the fire hazard zone. But what is very different here is the travel time and the response time. So again, the property owner who is living farther away where it takes 10 to 15 minutes to get there, is being asked for an annual rate of $413 versus the property owner who lives right across the street and they're being asked to pay the premium, which is $475.64. So again, this is an example of the special benefit where we have a property that is farther away that is paying the $413 versus the property that is closer and that's $475.64. So how does the balloting work? Okay, so I just want to be clear on this because also what's going to happen soon is there's a general election that's happening in June. And everyone's going to get a ballot from the county. Everyone fills out their ballot, they're a registered voter, and they submit it. Again, this is very different from that process. This is one ballot per parcel. We look at the county assessor's records, we get the mailed address that is on there, we send those ballots to every property owner that is within the district. If it is a second homeowner who lives in Kansas, we will send one to Kansas. We will always send it to the property owner, and we are working with the district that we also want any new addresses that they have. We will always make sure that we have the most up-to-date mailing address that we have available to be able to send to that property owner. So all ballots are weighted. Again, the dollar amount that you have on your proposed ballot is the amount of votes that you are going to be getting. This is extremely important. Only return ballots count. So if you get your ballot and you do not return it, we do not factor that amount into the total. So it has to be sent back to our, it has to be sent back. And it also has to be signed and it has to be signed. But we also provide an envelope for you to send it in, post-haste. It requires a simple majority to pass. So this is, I think, one of the things that I was just chatting with someone about. Let's say that we received $400 worth of ballots back. The total amount of votes we got back were $400. We would sum up the yes votes and we would sum up the no votes. If the yes votes total, let's say $250, we would divide $250 by 400, and that would give us a percentage of 62.5%. Okay, and then the other percent would be the no percent because you subtract 100 minus the 60 something, and that's what you get. So again, we only take in and we only factor when we tabulate those ballots that were returned and signed. So, again, the other thing that's different from the election that will be coming up with the county is this is not based on postmark date. So you can't, the public hearing is July 8th. If we get a ballot that is postmarked July 8th, it is not counted. It has to be received on the date before the public hearing for it to be counted. Any ballots that are received after that are stamped and just for accounting purposes. But I would encourage you and everyone else, post office is a little slower, so if you know someone who lives outside of the district, have them send it in enough time so that it can be received. If someone does not receive a ballot, they can contact our offices. Or if they have a change of mailing address, we would get the information from them and we can send them a replacement ballot. If someone sells a property, if they purchase the property, we can send once we get the information and confirm that the new property owner, we will cancel the old ballot and send the ballot to the new property owner. There is a process for waiving objections. Once the ballots mailed, all of the information that you see here are on our website. There will also be a website with supplemental instructions on how to submit written objections, and it will also be available on the website of how to return your ballot, and if you have any questions. So how the assessment functions. So basically, if the assessment is approved, there's going to be an oversight committee with the district, and also every year there has to be a budget. The budget has to show what is in place. And what the district has the option to go up to 5%, not the district, but the board. And I will say that it is not a guaranteed increase. So depending on what the fiscal year looks at and how it has, if they were able to get a grant, if they were able to save money in other places, then definitely that rate can go down or it will stay the same. And I do want to say there are districts out there that we currently work with that have not had to increase their rates, some in 10 years. Some have actually been able to go down. But every year, the district has to go before the board and before the community. And there's two ways. There's two resolutions that get passed. One is preliminarily approving the engineer's report, which will have the budget inside of it, and it will tell you the proposed rate. Then there's going to be a public hearing that's going to be held, and the public hearing notice gets published in a local newspaper. And it's a small community, so you'll be able to find out when that public hearing is being held, and that's also your opportunity to go before the board and be able to ask questions. And then before that gets passed, then or approved by the board, it's your opportunity to be able to speak and understand what where the finances are going for that fiscal year. Again, this is the Prop 218 assessment is about property owner protections. So funds cannot be redirected. They cannot be taken by the state, they cannot be taken by local, they cannot be put into general fund. There's a specific fund that has to be set up for these funds, and what is approved in the ballot notice and what you have approved on is what the funds have to be spent on. So in the timeline, so on April 8th, we preliminarily approved the engineer's reports, which set the dates that we're going to be talking about for the proposed assessment. And then there was also a board resolution adopting the 218 processes and procedures. With Proposition 218, in addition to being able to mail the ballots, there has to be at least a 45-day window for people to be able to return their ballots and to ask any questions. So those are the two resolutions that were approved on April 8th. On May 7th, we will be mailing the ballots. And then there's community meetings that will be happening on May 14th and June 18th. Written objections by June 25th, and then we will be holding the public hearing on July 8th. Again, at any point in time, if you have questions about your ballots, you have any questions about the calculations, if you have, again, if you need replacement ballots, definitely feel free to give us a call and we'll be able to help answer any questions that you have. We also have a special website that is set up for any FAQs that you might have that maybe were not answered at this meeting, and we'll definitely try to we'll get to questions after. And then July 8th, we're going to do the tabulation if we find that we will not do the tabulation, but we will find that if there's a 50% weighted support, if it's approved, then those assessments will be placed on the property tax bills. And so what we do is we work with the county auditor's office, and they charge a little bit for being able to put those assessments on the county property tax bills, and that's standard up and down the state. So the key takeaways from this is that Groveland is the only district dedicated fire station. And without the CAL FIRE contract, there is no other option. They can't stay at the two. They can't stay at the minimum 2.0. They have to go to the 3.0. The budget also supports replacing the fire engine, and the proposed assessment rate is $475.64 per single family home. But as you notice, there are some homes that would have a lower rate based on that travel time. The full engineer's report is available. And then also I want to point out, so what you will receive in the mail from us is this envelope right here. It'll say official ballot enclosed. Inside of that, there's going to be 3 pieces of information. One is a ballot notice that will say why the assessment is needed. It'll have information about how it was calculated, about the rate. It will give you the public hearing dates. It'll also tell you any dates of the community meetings and what number to call if you have any questions. The other piece of document that you will have in that envelope is the ballot itself. The ballot will have on one side the property owner and information. It will say yes, no, and then if you turn it over, it will say your parcel number and the proposed dollar amount. And then the third piece that's in there, I apologize, I thought it was another one. The third piece that's in there is the return envelope. The return envelope is postage paid, so whenever you sign your ballot and check yes or no, just fold it up, put it in there, and it will go directly to the return address. Okay.
Okay, so we will now transition to the question and answer portion of this evening's meeting. I will be walking through the audience with a microphone. To ensure that everyone has an opportunity to participate, each individual will be limited to 1 question at a time. This will allow us to hear from as many members of the community as possible. Once everyone who wishes to ask a question has had the opportunity, I will return around the room and address any additional or follow-up questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. What?
How do you pick where to go
I'm
first?
actually gonna start in the back of the room. The we can start in the front of the room, so I'm gonna have to go to the back of the room.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm Jeff Paulson. We own a old cabin on Mueller Drive. And I just wanted to say I fought wildfires as a park ranger and worked for a fire department. and I have a master's in public administration, which means government bureaucracy. So this is not a perfect proposal, but folks, the staff said they cannot advocate, but I can. And what I say is we need fire protection. We're surrounded by a flammable forest. The winds get worse, the weather gets worse. We cannot afford to not have good fire protection. So although this isn't a perfect proposal, though it costs a little money, I think it's very important to vote yes.
So, right over here. So I'm reading from Proposition 218 here, and it says Proposition 218 specifies that no property related fee may be levied to pay for a general governmental service, such as police or fire service. How is this not a general governmental service?
Okay, so what I'd like to say is, there are cities that provide, a certain level of coverage. But what you're gonna find here is that the fire district is particular to Groveland, the fire department is particular to Groveland. So those services that we're gonna be paying for will be covered for the properties that are here. That is the importance of having this, this assessment. And I will say, as I've mentioned before, that we have had quite a lot of assessments for fire protection and emergency services. In fact, Groveland had one, I believe, that ended in 2000, that ended in 2012. So it is a very common funding mechanism for fire protection.
But that's not the question.
Yeah.
So what I'll say is this is, again, a very common mechanism. If it was not, we would not be doing it. It was, we've had the engineer's report, approved, reviewed by legal counsel. We have worked with other legal counsel up and down the state as well.
So can you provide on the website, any other questions for that?
The legal counsel's response, so people have it. And that would be.
Easy question, where can we find this presentation?
So I have a little spiel at the end of this meeting. This presentation and a lot of other information is going to be available on our website, and I'm going to do a little demo to show you how to access that. Okay, more questions from the back?
I'm curious about the reason for a higher rate of farther out. What is the justification for that?
Is there a,
I misunderstand it's in the lower rate?
does this one work?
Let's try it.
Hi.
I beg your pardon.
Test, test.
I would say by.
Hold it, I'll take it.
Oh, got it.
There you go.
Okay, so the reason for the, you asked for the higher amount. I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yes,
Could
I
you,
understood that there was. It's a higher amount to the farther out.
no, it's a higher amount if you live closer to.
Okay. I apologize, I misunderstood.
So that is one of the components of the special benefit. So if you live closer to the fire department, it is going to take them less time to be able to respond to you than if you live 15 minutes away. So it's considered a premium because you live closer. If we have, again, one of the other factors was a fire hazard factor. So as I mentioned, if you lived in a low fire hazard zone and someone lived in a higher fire hazard zone, their rates would be different as well because they're living in a very higher fire zone versus a low fire hazard zone.
Clarification, if you would. You used some verbiage I didn't quite track, and that was the relationship between the weighted votes, who gets more votes, who gets less votes by virtue of the kind of property they own and how those are allocated. I didn't get clearly how that's done, except I got a little bit in that sounds like a vacant lot is leased. A person's residence is next, and then commercial property. But within that, there seemed to be a lot of specificity that I can track from there.
Yeah, okay, so we look at different property types, and so those were just actually a few, but we look at commercial properties, we look at offices, we look at agriculture, we look at storage. So it's a variety of different factors. These were just three that were put on there. And as I mentioned before, what we do is we start off and we look at the statistics for different property types based on the NFPA. And then we also look at if there's structures, we look at the average replacement structure for properties within Groveland and also in Tuolumne County. And that helps us to start with how we set up what we call a SFE for each individual property type. And then after that, we look at, again, if they're in the different fire hazard zone. And then after that, we look at the time travel factors. So all of those combined, what we do is we figure out how much each property would pay. We total them up, what we call total effective SFEs. We look at the amount of budget that the fire that is needed for the fire assessment. And then we divide it and we get the rate per single family equivalent.
Let
And then
me,
that was Mike. Go ahead.
So like-
I'm trying to give just a little, I see some head shaking, but maybe I can simplify it. Okay, let's say your ballot was 475. Okay, it listed on there that your assessment was be 475. Here's your piece of paper with two columns, one that says yes, one that says no. Your ballot comes in, it's tallied, it's a no. It goes in the no column as 475. Okay. My ballot's for 432. I vote yes. That goes in the yes column. We right now, with just those two votes, we have 475 over here and no. 432 is yes. It's less than 50%. As it goes down, as people vote, let's just say if somebody with 10 properties, they vote no, they're all 475. It's 4,750 in the no column. They now that column has 4,750 plus your vote, and only my vote in the yes column. And there's 10 votes that come in,
Is it basically $1 a vote? That's like really simple.
Okay, and so at the bottom, it's totaling those numbers all the way down the yes and no column. When you look at the bottom, if the amount of the yes votes is in excess of the dollar amount of the no votes, then that's considered pass.
Divided by the number of votes that come in?
Well, no, it's
Just a simple
it's
majority.
a true calculation, dollar of the yes votes, at the bottom of that column, and the dollar of the no votes.
It is, but if I pay $4.75, I pay $4.75. That's what my yes.
Okay, so
It's a-
I wish you would have been a little bit more prepared, to have that map somewhere so we could look at it, see who's affected. But the calculation I have for the acres that I own is $23,000. Isn't that neat? Then another question is, how about the Forest Service and the BLM? They pay anything for all their acres?
Yeah, good question.
They got more stuff.
They receive a ballot.
They do. So with Proposition 218, special public agencies, we do put a proposed assessment on them and we will send them a ballot. We do, the only way that some property would not be charged is if we could not say that they would receive a special benefit.
Questions?
So this is gonna be on our tax form, not on our on monthly bill like so that's a pretty big chunk we're taking out every year, or twice a year. And then so like for instance, the 475, is that once a year or is that twice a year?
No, the 475 is once a year, so again, if it's approved, we would send the information over to the county auditor's office. They place it on the property tax bills and they do, the payments are due, I think, 2 installments.
And
So they
the other
split
thing
it in
is,
half.
They split it.
It was paid like $200.
GCSD has already nailed us big time with the water and sewer increases. We're being hammered with all kinds of raised insurance rates, inflation is going crazy, blah, blah, blah. It's a terrible thing to be asking people for more money. And I think there needs to be more fiscal responsibility from GCSD. And I personally urge everyone to vote no on this.
Right, any other questions in the back area? All right, moving forward.
Hi, first and foremost, I wanted to thank our firefighters for everything that you do, and this is never a question as to how much we believe in you, and I mean, you are, in my eyes, you're our heroes, but I don't make enough money to pay for your services. I thought that was covered in what we already pay taxes for, but I do understand what's going on. I just wonder what has been, as far as where we're gonna come to this money. It seems like you always go to the homeowners, and there's only 3,000 homes here. And I'm sitting at the dog park sniffing tar and propane from our new water management plant that we just built. I mean, where was the planning for that? So with this added on, I am questioning GCSD and your ability to foresee the future, to plan correctly. Where's Tom McClintock? Does he have anything to do with helping the constituents out? Exactly. So I don't think we've tried hard enough to find the funds, and I don't have any. I'd love to be able to pay for everything, but we need to look further.
Let me just answer, just at least give you some information about what we've done with the last 7 years. Okay, we've always constantly looked for state and federal funds. I guarantee you, if you talk to Mr. McClintock and say, are you going to appropriate money from the federal budget to fund the operation of a fire department in a community in Groveland? His answer would be very clear. He does not support appropriations for those types of things. Okay, so it's a good ask. We do ask. I serve on a statewide board for special districts. I have for 28 years. Very tied in with the legislature, very understanding of where the sources of funds are. There are very limited grants for the operation of the department. You can apply for a piece of equipment, but it's based on, in California, it's based on a criteria of income. Our income level in Groveland is not considered disadvantaged. It is at a higher level, so it's above the statewide median household income. I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying that's what the state does. So they make decisions based on disadvantaged communities. We apply every year for engines and for different equipment. We're very successful so far doing that. We've approached the county. We work very cooperatively with the county to try to be able to help with providing services in this area. They have moved forward with an engine that's now housed in our station that provides backup, usually response outside the boundaries. That was a huge benefit. We've also looked at our budget completely. When we look at that pie graph, the majority of it's a contract with CAL FIRE. We can't affect that outcome of that contractual amount. The only thing that we can do is move out in the number of years when they go to the 3.0 staffing, but we can't move it further out. Okay, so that's an expense. Like the rest of it is paper and pens and and fuel prices and things that we'd love to be able to affect. And as a result, we buy our fuel in bulk. We get our electricity at 10 cents a kilowatt hour from the GPPA. We do everything that we can to control the cost and control the cost of with CAL FIRE. They come in under budget each year. And that is what has allowed us to have enough money in the bank to be able to operate for the next couple of years at the 2.0 staffing. So if we didn't manage the budget with CAL FIRE, we would have money on credit. So we have looked at, we spent a bunch of time. We had a funding measure that we had planned about 5 years ago, to bring to the voters and roll out and have some conversation about. But at the same time, the county was moving forward with a sales tax measure that was intended to benefit the entire county fire structure. We put our measure off to let them go through theirs. You can't have two competing measures on a ballot. It never works. So we worked with the county. We joined into a joint powers authority with the county, and we supported Measure B to hopefully get $500,000 rolling this way. It was supported highly in Groveland. It wasn't throughout the county, and it failed. And that was another 2-year process to go through that. We have again, we looked at every source of grants, we looked at every source of revenue, we've tried to reduce expenses. We have a very small piece of that pie that we can affect. If we took that piece of the pie out and only funded the CAL FIRE contract, we're still hundreds of thousands of dollars a year short, because all we get is the property tax revenue. So that's it. We'll provide much more information about those before.
Hi, I'm Diana McDermott, and my question is, you had put up a map here that is in that. My question to you is, do you service outside? Will Station 78 service beyond that area? And if so, what are they contributing?
We have a mutual aid agreement. Okay, all of the fire departments in the county have a mutual automatic aid agreement. So when the alarm goes off, depending on what that alarm is, the closest resource response, depending on what it is. Again, that's what I talked about the lift assist, where it might just be helping someone upstairs or out of bed or whatever. If it's in the district boundaries, it's going to be the district engine that responds if they're available. If it's outside the district boundaries, it's going to be the county engine currently that responds outside the district boundaries. If it's a fire or a vehicle crash or something, if we create a fire or an emergency condition and it's outside the district boundaries, the county engine will roll first, we'll roll right behind it. If we can pull off, we pull off. When there's an emergency, a fire or an accident in the district boundaries, you get the district engine that goes and you get the county engine that goes. So they provide a benefit to us. We provide a mutual benefit to them. And as long as that's in balance, then that's what we look for.
Okay.
5 years ago, that engine wasn't in our bay. It is now. We are working to keep it in.
I just wanted to say that if this doesn't pass and we don't have Station 78, I can guarantee those, all of us that are sitting here this evening will have higher costs of our insurance. So we're gonna pay one way or the other, and I much prefer to have it in our area, a station.
Hi, my name is Alita Carlson. I'm out in Lake area. The question that I have is that we have a fairly large TOT tax that's collected from all of the rentals from all of the different areas in District 4. And most of that, or a very high percentage of the incoming TOT taxes, goes directly to the Visitors Bureau. I would love to see some of that stay here and help pay for our fire protection. And Steve Griefer, I think, is the one that would need to bring that up to the Board of Supervisors, but they don't solve it.
Shall we see?
My phone died.
So I got a big mouth, everybody can hear me? What's that? You guys know I got a big mouth, so the TOT tax, all of it goes to the county, and it goes into the fire, the road, and the services. Only 12% of the TOT tax that we get goes to actually visit Tuolumne County. So when visit of that percentage, so they don't get
they get about $3 million a year out of the entire TOT tax. Everything else goes to roads, fire, and law enforcement. And then we work closely with the other agencies to make sure that TOT tax is being pushed out to the community where we can. That work?
I understand that I would love to see more of it pushed out to our community.
Well, so the TOT tax goes into the general fund for the county. And then it gets dispersed out throughout the entire county. So for who lives in PML? All right, got to figure as much. All right. So when you pay your dues, your assessments to PML, it doesn't go into a general. This is going to go to the golf course. This is going to go to the marina. It all goes into the general pot, and then it gets filtered out as their budgets work out. And that's exactly what we do with the TOT tax. And right now, there's actually a board movement to put more of that TOT tax into the roads and fire and law enforcement. So you're going to actually go from 780,000 last year, and this new board is going to be about 3 million for roads and things like that. So you're going to actually start seeing that share. And we agree, we want to keep this fire station here. We want to make sure that you're served by the county, just the county is served by GCSD. But I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll go with the spirit of that.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see.
Okay. So you mentioned that all of the dollars from this assessment go into the pie chart. And the dollars be moved around in the pie chart at GCSD's leisure.
They can be, but as you know, as I mentioned before, like 53% is already the Cal Fire Schedule A. And then the other part is the 3O reserve, so eventually there's a very small amount that is left besides.
Can they take the
So
money for the fire engines and give it to administrative costs and you just answer the question?
They could, but you know, once you have a loan for a fire engine, it's hard to say, well, look, we're gonna move it somewhere else.
The only way to reduce the 3O cost is to close the station.
Right. It's a
cost.
Hey, for full transparency, that the answer to your question is yes. We don't have, we're not gonna have the flexibility to do much of that. But we understand that in our budgeting, which we have done every year for those administrative expenses, we built in what we expect staff costs to increase, what we expect for, our mechanics and their equipment. For all of the operating costs, we built in based on factors of what fuels at 7%, electricity's at 8%. All of those things are built in, and those are in that administrative and operations chunk. So, and between the fuels also, there's not a lot of room, but also you have an elected local board of directors. And we have an oversight committee that I would hope, when that's established, we'll have a very close eye on that. And we'll have a close eye to that and the board and the election of the board. So that's a really good question.
Earlier there was a question about how votes are allocated. We understand that it's by the dollar of the assessment. But how were these numbers come up with? I understand that a single family home is more or less a unit. And an acre is also a unit, but how do acres scale to single family units? And so, for example, is a hotel commercial or multifamily? It's about as big. And for the large landowner, I understand that 317 an acre scale by distance possibly. How was the acre to unit conversion done?
So we said, as I mentioned before, there are specific factors that we use. And so when we pull up this, we do have an engineer's report we'll put up on the website. I believe it has a rate chart. And it's per 4 acres. And once you get to a specific amount of acres, that calculation changes. So I think it's once you get to 5 acres or so, that would change. But for your answer, your answer, when we allocated all of those SMBs to all of the districts, it came out to like 3,335. Then what we did was we took the total dollar amount, we divided by that number, and it gave us the proposed assessment.
I'm gonna have one more thing to that, because in the assessment engineer's report, you see references to various studies and various standards, and those are established documents that look at nationwide and regionally the level of calls that you can expect from a commercial establishment versus manufacturing establishment versus a residential lot. And so that affects the calculation to come to what a multiplier could be. Your question about a single family versus a hotel's commercial, a single family or a condo or apartment complex is a portion of the single family.
Hi, my name is Lynn Nakanishi, and I have a question on my, I believe it was the second page that was up there. It was a graph that had two lines, one for expenses and one for revenue. I would like to know what percentage of that expense number comes from fire activity in PML versus outside PML. So I've been at 3 different locations in Sonora, for example, that were on fire, and our Groveland, big huge letters across the bottom, our Groveland fire engine were there, not just one, not just two, but multiple ones, even our pretty white truck, okay? So they're utilizing the facilities that are being charged to us because we live here and have the fire station. Well, they got a fire station too. So my question is, what percentage of our expenses are attributable to non-PML locations? And what percentage of revenue? I mean, I'm not satisfied with hearing we have some independent contract with people outside. That's bull. I want to know specifically what percentage of the expenses and what expenses on revenue, what the comparison is. Are we paying for Sonora's fire department?
Well, I think this is the man to answer the researchers thing.
Hello. Thought I was gonna get off lucky. Great question. My name's Nathan Gorham, Assistant Chief for Cal Fire and of course your Groveland Fire Department. To answer, I can't really say the percentage of the calls, right? But we know that GCSD service area is bigger than the footprint of PML, right? The 14.9 square miles. In answering your question regarding why engines from the hill that might have Groveland written on them, whether it be the GCSD engine or the county engine, are catching a fire or on a call down in the 108 corridor, they come off the hill regularly. Generally, it's for maintenance or training with other agencies. As PCAMPA had expressed, we have a county-wide auto aid agreement that dispatches the closest, most appropriate type of resource. So toward the end of last March, your Groveland engine was down at Station 51 in East Sonora off Hillsdale Drive, Mona Village Station, and a working structure fire happened across the street. Because of that partnership and have that training, we had 3 Type 1 engines at scene in under 3 minutes to mitigate the emergency to save lives and property. So it's
Hear about specific fires, you know, that doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is if you said 85% of the expenses charged to PML actually belongs in PML, and the other 15% belongs to XYZ County, and we are charging them X number of percentage and the numbers match. That makes sense to me. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but you know.
and forgive me, I'm failing to get the context of the question. I got done with it?
Yeah, no, okay, let me see if I can frame it if that doesn't work, okay. We have data about every call that comes in. We don't necessarily analyze them on, inside the gates versus outside. Because fire doesn't care whether you're responding. What we, hang on. We, that red line that's on the map, that will provide a better copy of that. That's what we care about. So anything, whether they're inside the gates or outside, that they're paying for it. They voted this district to be responsible for it, and that's where we focus. That entire area goes all the way from the top of the grade to the far end of PMF.
In Sonora.
No, that is under mutual automatic rate, if needed. With the assessment that we're talking about, the assessment does not pay for that percentage of the cost. Okay?
Because it's so small.
Because it's a general benefit, it's a benefit that's not specific to the properties here. So you see in the engineer's report that there's a calculation done of the number of calls that are outside the boundaries, the number of medical calls, because those aren't funded with the assessment, the number of calls adjacent to the district boundaries. Those are in the report, quantified separately. There's a percentage applied to it. And then we have to make sure that our other revenue, which is our existing revenue, our property tax revenue, is enough to be able to cover that cost. It's small. When the county engine was not here, we had a higher percentage of calls outside of our boundaries. Right now, we're called under mutual aid very infrequently. Okay, when it happens for a reason, but it's very infrequent. And in fact, we get as much or more benefit from that county engine being in the station in the district boundaries, because that's where the calls are. So we have to, the report had to calculate that and had to make sure that there was enough other revenue, non-assessment revenue, to cover those types of calls. So we don't, the assessment does not have funding in it to pay for those types of calls. That's like different.
Hi, my name is Doug Archer. I'm a new resident here, and I'm outside of the red circle, square, whatever. And I believed through most of this presentation that I was exempt from all of this because I'm not going to get a ballot, I'm not going to get assessed. But the woman made a comment about people outside of the area, and with regards to making sure that they have their ballots to the post office in time, and that kind of threw me. So are the people outside actually not being assessed and are not eligible?
No, the example would be the Bay Area property owners.
Yeah, you own the property here, but you live outside, your permanent residence is outside of the boundary, so making sure that yes, they're making sure those people who don't live.
My primary property is outside of it.
Correct.
I'm not involved with this.
Correct.
You're here for fun.
Hi, Karen Hopkins, Gladys Scrap came back up. What I would like to understand is if the assessment passes, is that expense versus revenue gap? Does it completely close?
Completely closed.
It does.
Completely closed.
Okay, thanks.
That's the, and that is the challenge that we had over the last 6 months is because like I led off with, we've got to provide this, we've got to make sure that it's 24/7, we're going to make sure that the equipment runs, we have to make sure we have the staffing, we meet the contract requirement. We had to estimate the amount of money that we needed. Cal Fire hits their budget exactly every year. If we purchase an engine and have $199,000 a year debt service payment, if we have to have a roof on the fire station, we have to guarantee that we have enough money in there to be able to do that. If we reduce the amount arbitrarily, what we found is that in year 3, 4, 5, we go in the red. That's not where we can operate, because then we go through this process again at that point, and people get confused. Hey, you just assessed this. What are you doing? This is finding that for the long term, and the potential for an inflator takes into consideration if there are changes. 2020, we would have never known we were going to see the inflation that we are, the insurance changes that we are. In the event we get, let's just say the county comes up with a bunch of money, and all of a sudden they hand us a bunch of money I don't hate to use the county as an example, but I mean, you're with the federal government. McClintock hands us a check for $2 million for a year. That money, we take it into consideration for that budget year. The Citizens Committee will see it, the board will see it, and believe me, hopefully the room is packed saying, hey, that's $2 million in the budget now. How about we reduce the rate for this year? That's really what that's all about.
First, Dudley, question I got, the airport is put in GCSD, so I assume that they will be sending a ballot to the county board of supervisors. But the question actually is, GCSD is in the area, so are they gonna get the ballot also?
Yes. Those are Mountain Lake, so are the schools, so is the BLM, so is the Forest Service, so is the county.
Can they vote no, Pete?
They can vote however they want.
David Gilby, so what are we doing about protecting ourselves from intrusion? For instance, all fire sites out there raised by, 30% or Columbia County take their fire engine back. We're left. I mean, it looks like we're gonna be pretty well funded here. And we might be right for the picking from other less funded.
Yeah, the county engine, let's use that example. Let's just say the county engine is removed from the station. That doesn't necessarily change our expenses. Okay, other than right now they split electricity and fuel and that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily change our expenses because we still have the cost of that engine in the station there. And we don't pay for the county engine, so it doesn't change that. What it changes is we may have to respond more outside the boundaries. It's not the fuel, it's not the wear and tear. Those are deal, but they're not the big deal. The big deal is when that engine is way out there and somebody has a heart attack here, and it takes a point and get there, that's the problem. So, but we don't control that, and we've had a great conversation with Steve Griefer, and he is very supportive of it. Let me speak for Steve, jump up and down from Groveland. That is a challenge for Steve. I think the community needs to be engaged with Steve on that part of the discussion. He needs some exercise doing it.
But I mean, you say my name 3 times when I show up, so, I'm gonna give you my card, I want you to reach out to me, I'll get you the data that you need. Okay, so. I will die on this hill, we are not pulling this fire truck, county fire truck out of the building. Right, so if there's anything I can tell you, it is my primary goal, my primary mission to make sure that county fire trucks will stay here at all costs. I want to also make it really clear that this assessment is for GCSD.
Yes.
This GCSD assessment is for what happens within the boundaries of GCSD. The county is what's on the outside of that boundary. So we want to make sure that when there's a call and you see the truck down somewhere, it might be because there's a mutual aid call. We don't charge GCSD when the county comes in and assists, just as GCSD doesn't charge the county when they assist us. So that's why your question's a little hard to pin down because I don't have that exact data like the chief said. Lastly, we all know that fire is a primary concern for our county, right? We also know that anything south of the river, we're on our own, right? So we have to be very sure that we're going to address those issues. And that's why these discussions and this topic specifically is so important. So the county is 100% dedicated to being a partner, to assist, to help out. GCSD has its own rules and regulations on how they want to operate. They do contract with CAL FIRE. So does the county, so it gets a little awkward at times, or we're fighting over the last piece of bread, if you will, of how we want to slice up the budget. But I can tell you here and now that I will die on that hill to make sure this fire station is manned at all times with a county fire truck. Normally I like talking when people are eating so they don't yell at me, so it's good so far. Alright, so I want to address the insurance rate issue. I know we got some insurance here as well. The insurance commissioner, Laura, he does whatever he wants to do, right? He's lame duck, you need to get rid of him. We have a primary election coming up in June, which will be the first step in electing your new fire commissioner. You're gonna want to pay attention to that and see who's running and what their expertise are. Because I can use my platform as your supervisor to make sure that I can get the word out to those individuals to come out and address the concerns we're having with our fire insurance. I feel your pain, right? I know you hear that a lot from politicians, but I pay $12,000 in fire insurance, right? So I feel your pain. When it goes up, it goes up. To the question about McClintock's office, I speak to them regularly. And yes, he's correct. Tom's position is not to give out appropriations to others, but we are working with them to make sure that the fire service within BLM land, within the Forest Service land, within Yosemite is being well protected as well. So up here, even though you don't see it, kind of like the cops you never see around that are out there, we do have fire resources available that just may not see, but they are out there. So there's a lot of conversations going on regarding fire service and this assessment. The county stands behind it. We met 2 hours today. I was at the board meeting. We are bringing all this information back to the board to hear what you're saying. We're working with GCSD to make sure that they're successful. I would say keep peppering them with questions because I like it when I'm not getting yelled at, so that's what we're starting. So, you tell me, question?
Me.
The county?
Me.
Oh, sorry. See, I'm gonna go take over. I apologize. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Lori Young. I'm going to ask this question. It means Steve's the best person to answer it. It looks like to me that we're the only major fire station on this side of the county. I'm just wondering how many fire stations are there in the county, and are any of the other ones coming to special assessments to fund fire safety?
I'll take those backwards. There are no other stations, there are no other districts I'm aware that are doing any assessments, that I'm aware of in the county.
Queenhurst has 3.
That they're doing it, that currently moving forward.
It hasn't been in place, they've had them in place.
Right, they have been in place. So the question was, are there anybody else? So Queenhurst Fire did their own assessments. There are no other districts here that are currently pushing.
And we will, they passed theirs 2010.
So I'll say it again, there are no current assessments that are being claimed other than the Groveland assessment, right? So your second question was how many fire stations?
There are 13 fire service providers in the county. DCSP is one of them, obviously, Walden County Fire is another. So when you talk about GCSP, it's one station department. DCFP was a combination of the 14 station department back in the 70s. We're currently down at 5 paid rear staff positions with 10 volunteers.
Okay. One station. I'll leave that for guys. I think your last question, or your first question was something class was how many fire stations are there on the side of the river, right? County. So you have the Tuolumne County engine, you have GCSB engine, there's a Cal Fire engine up a barrel, right, which is seasonal. You have BLM has their own fire trucks, which you'll never see because they're spread out wherever. And then Yosemite has their own fire suppression services also, but they're in the valley. However, we do have large events, whether it's traffic pollution or it's a fire or it's something along those lines. As Pete said, whoever's closest is going to roll. We can always sort all the other details out. But our primary goal is human safety and then property.
Is this Steve question or somebody else?
Hello, you there? Okay. I have a question and a comment, so I'll do my question first. In the presentation for the single family equivalent, there was one slide that said 475.64, and another that said if you were 10 minutes away, it's 413.81. So is that correct? Number one. My comment is that we have an ambulance tax that's going to be coming up or real soon here at the end of the summer. And I don't think people are aware that the current amount that we pay for ambulance is not going to work. It might be double or triple, so that has been kept very quiet. And my other comment is, it says on this piece of paper that there will be a citizen oversight committee with review spending annually. Mr. Campa, since you came here, when you came here, we had a fire committee. We got rid of all of our committees.
I have asked for years at GCSD meetings to please establish a fire committee, and you haven't done it, but you've done it now. I think it's a little late because you may have gotten other results had you had that citizens committee.
I will say, this is the slide you're talking about, correct?
There's two of them. One slide had a picture of the house
Yeah,
here and
that's
a picture of
this
the
one.
house here.
Correct.
How do you get this number? I mean, how do you know it's 10 to 15 minutes? Is it a Google thing?
Melanie, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, how do you think about it? And is that correct?
Those are
So-
good questions.
Yeah, so we use ArcGIS network analysis, and it's used by logistics companies, planning companies. If you look on the CAL FIRE website, it will have their information about where specific locations are, but it's a very popular and highly used mechanism to be able to detect where you're in a specific location, like the fire district. And then we're able to put all of the parcel layer that we use from the county. And based on that GIS network analysis, it will tell us approximately the time. It will
So
take.
that is correct. You had two. You showed that 413 and the 475.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that will be on the different ballot.
Yes.
I just quickly wanna know who owns the little fire station by the
County?
We don't have it on our property today.
Yeah, I think we leased it from, at one point, we were leasing it from the county and storing it in there. It's a garage.
Yeah, but if it was manned, our insurance would go down $2,000 a year, so that matters, because that makes this number easy.
Yeah, but you have that living quarters there and everything built for it to be a 24/7 station, but I mean, you are correct.
Well, I don't know if this would be a John Keeper question, but I don't know, we don't know. How many hours a day does it have to be manned to be considered a manned station? Maybe it doesn't have to be 24 hours a day. You can, oh.
So part of our insurance rates are based on the distance from the fire station. So if you live over 5 miles from the fire station, you pay a higher insurance rate, right? No, that is not the assessment. I'm not talking about the special assessment. I'm talking about your homeowner's fire insurance rate. It is based on a 5-mile perimeter from the fire station. So if you live 5.2 miles away like I do, you're the privilege of paying an extra $1,000 a year for the fire insurance. If the little fire station at the airport was manned, that means everybody who lives farther out than 5 miles of that station would have a great benefit to their fire insurance bill. But I don't know how many hours a day it has to be manned for us to achieve that benefit. If it's not 24, it might help us. Thank you.
We got this last meeting. If that facility out by the airport, it really has to be upgraded. People already commented on it, you gotta have living quarters.
That's my question. To benefit fire insurance rates, does it have to be manned 24/7?
Yes.
That is the one answer we've never gotten yet.
Okay.
So now we have.
There you go.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Courtney Fever. I want to touch base on Alita's statement on the TOT tax. Can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so Alita mentioned something about the TOT tax. You brought that into the picture as well about it goes into the general fund. I don't understand why we continue to be the redhead stepchild of the South. Because all that TOT money is coming from our area, because they're all going to the park. They're not overnighting in Sonora, although I'm sure some do, but it's not, the draw is not Kennedy Meadows there, it's Yosemite. So why are we continue to be the south of the river treatment when we're the ones providing a big amount of that TOT money?
So, I
I don't wanna take over their meeting, right? So we can address the TOT separately at a different time, which I would strongly encourage, but the gist of it is that the assessment has nothing to do with TOT. TOT goes into several other functions of the government, and it's not fire services. That GCSD, they get funded from the taxpayer, or from property tax, right? So if I was king for a day, I would tell Sonora and everybody north of the river, we earn it, we keep it. I'm not king for a day. So, but I'm gonna have a town hall meeting later, in a month and a half. We can address that, and I'll get more details for you.
Thank you. I'm Earl Rohart of Unit 12, and I'm just trying to look forward. I mean, many of us have moved here. This is our retirement place. This is a place we belong to. So if we look at $475,000 this year, or $475.64, excuse me. And we go out 10 years, that's close to $800 for a year. And then on top of that, we have like the ambulance increases. And then we know what's happening with the water, the sewer, and stuff, how big that increase is. I mean, a person could be looking at over $1,200 a year on his assessments coming out in 10 years going forward. How do we look at maybe taking 5%, make it 2.5%? Is there a way to look at those numbers a little different? Well, that's the thing that we know that the CAL FIRE contract goes up 5% a year. They have to work fully staffed with real staffing. That's been the history and it's a projection into the future. So if we have on the ballot a lower amount, that's the maximum that we could charge. Even if they went up 5% each year, we couldn't go over that and make a big gap. And that kind of goes to the question of, does that line match? Does revenue match expense with this assessment? The answer is yes. If we modify that maximum down, I'm not saying it's going to, that 5% materializes every year. We have to have a 5% increase in cost, and we have to come in budget on the other things for management to make a recommendation to the board that we implement the maximum increase of 5%. So that 5% is a ceiling. And again, as Melanie talked about, many communities have been able to keep it the same for years because they had budgeted for a certain amount, came in less. Or got some other source of revenue. So that's what the decision is made in the public hearing each and every year by the board. We have to get an updated assessment engineer's report, and that has to go to a public hearing with the board to consider that. So I'd like to see this many people participate in that process, and I'd like to see the Citizens Advisory Committee that's formed specifically for the assessment to have a thorough understanding and challenge those decisions. That's what we've got is if we put a lower amount, we can't exceed that ceiling. And our projections tell us that up to 5% maybe. That puts a pretty high bill though after 10 years. Per year.
Okay, so my question is, what is the criteria by which you are determining what is a single family and a multi-family?
In the county property tax records, they have specific designations that they dedicate to each property, so that's usually where we start. And so if they identify it as a single family home, then we would place it as a single family home. If it's a multi-family, 2 to 4 units, or if they're 5+ units, those usually have different designations. So we have a complete list of all of the classifications that the county has, and we take a look at it. There's also sometimes other factors that we look at. If say a property might be designated as vacant, but we see an improved value, we also go and do aerial research on that property to see if it is in fact something more than just a vacant property.
How do you know? You know, I know.
So
I know whether it's multi-family.
it's part of the county record, so Like, that's where we start, we have the number, like. So there's either report number 10 or something like that. So in the property tax records, you don't have the property owner name, you don't have the site address, the mailing address, they'll have all the values, land value, improved value, exempted value, total value. They'll have sometimes, depending on the county square feet, sometimes they'll have building, the number of units, if it's a multifamily, or sometimes even for single family, they'll have one. But there's a number of different variety factors that, we get with the county's.
About these Airbnbs for all over town. And are they waiting?
You mean, so the Airbnb is like a single family home?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of them out there to climb out. Which seems want to come out here and they're using our services. Why not waive them in?
So there's a fun. So if the property owner is a single family home, if they Airbnb their home, they're still considered a single family home. Even if they live in the area.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Are you concerned that Airbnb properties are not going to pay the assessment?
Well, they can have the work for me.
Yeah, I understand.
They're looking, make a lot of money.
So there's, there's usually single family residences.
Yeah, but they're getting drunk and fall over the road.
So do people that live full time in their house as well. Okay, I'm making sure I'm getting to people who haven't asked a question yet.
Well, there are questions going to the back, but just from that perspective, we just started to get data about the children. I know we started to get it's not, when you look at the impact of, you don't have the family that lives there at the same time as. I know, I get that. And so we have the call volume, and that's constantly being analyzed, but, again, with the Airbnbs that are permitted through the county, they're on and they're off. So what happens if we, issue an assessment and it goes on for their, 27, 28 year, and then 2 months into it, they say, okay, we're gonna pull our permit. Is that now?
Then someone will buy a house, we won't have the drop off.
I know, it's something we can do. It's something that needs to be looked at over time, but it's probably better suited for some type of a fee structure versus a tax.
Then give them a fee, you got an assessment, give them a fee.
Come on, I can talk about it. I mean, I think that's a discussion.
So I think the county charges me for, and not me, but these type of properties, right? Yeah, and everybody here is in the county, and they all pay county taxes. And they all pay the sales tax in the county. And seems to me like all of those taxes go to pay for like the county fire. Has there or was there any consideration given to maybe rolling the GCSD fire department into the county fire department so that there's not a special assessment for people that are in GCSD, they just get covered like everybody else by a county fire department? And if not, is there a consideration for that going forward?
We really put Steve on his spot again on this one because that's right now. Right now, the county is in a budget crunch. They're having difficulty in planning their fire services. The purpose of GCSD was because we were removed, because in many cases we have a single vote at the county board of supervisors. The reason for the district is to determine the level of services that are needed locally to control costs, to save life and property. And that's why you have a locally elected board. And that's why we think locally first versus going through the county or giving services to the county, that then we would have to have this room of people in the board of supervisors chambers if there was a conversation about reducing services here versus making that decision locally.
Well, everybody here is paying county taxes, regardless of whether they live in GCSD or not. But now you're being asked to pay a huge premium to support a fire department that really should be part of the county responsibility.
That's the question for your board of supervisors. I don't expect them to. I wouldn't expect them, this is a local, as I said in the very beginning, this is a local service, a local mandate, group form to provide the service. This is a plan to provide the service.
My question was, you guys talk with the county all the time. Has there been any conversation about maybe moving in that direction?
About abandoning GCSD fire?
Abandoning it, moving it in with the county and let the county assume control.
That, I mean, that's pretty much discussion. That takes that would either be a contract with the county of some sort, but you have to understand, the first thing that the county is gonna look at is this funding gap. Just because it goes to the county doesn't mean that that gap doesn't exist. They're gonna have to pull that, $1.5 million from somewhere else just to fund that gap.
Absolutely.
Well, that's something that, again, that's the decision.
But we don't even get there, you don't discuss. So, one question.
Well, we did work with them and they provided an engineer.
Excuse me?
Everybody here is being asked to pay for it, so.
Okay, so here we are for lots of us with lots of questions. You stole a little bit of my thunder because I want to give a couple of other options. Everybody told us there's no way you can have anything staffed under a trio, and that's not true. Not true. If we staffed our own engine with our own employees like we used to, we could staff it whatever level we want. We won't live up to the CDF standards and the statewide energy standards of trio staffing. So there is an option. I would not recommend if we do that. We need our trained firefighters. Trio is the perfect opportunity to be able to staff this engines at the proper level. I do kind of agree with the last comments in that we do have another option. Keep the building to the county. Give the county our fire service. Let's concentrate on water, sewer, and our beloved park. And let's let the firemen be firemen. Groveland Community Services is here for water, sewer.
I'm going to make the different with you. The district was formed to provide fire protection, park, water, and sewer. That's our focus. I can't.
But we were charged for that originally. We're a business. I'm one of the business. I own part of the business. One parcel of property inside the district. I own part of it. If it's not a viable business, you've got to get out of the business.
That's again, what you're asking is if the district gets out of the fire business, you're asking the district or the county to absorb the entire cost of that station, reduced by a portion of the property taxes that are received. But at this point, the county is reducing stations and reducing services. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
They're doing that and they're struggling with their budget. It's been discussed.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have Steve, who understands and lives here with us and understands the system. And he will do everything because they closed 56 and not something like that. We're actually staffed at a higher level south of the river per capita per acre per population than the rest of the county. You folks here may not know that. We're in better shape than the rest of the county when it comes to response and coverage. And it's all because of the guys that are staffing our stations and are here locally to do it.
Okay, we're gonna move on.
Hey, can I address one thing now?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're not wrong and you're partially right on some fronts. Something to think about, your GCSE jurisdictional area is 14.7 square miles, right? Maybe 14.9. But you got one engine for that whole thing dedicated. Now look at Tuolumne County Fire Department. Our service area is 1,620 jurisdictional square miles. Right now, we have 5 engines. July 1st, we have 4 engines. So right now, you got 1 engine for about 15 square miles. The county, as of July 1st, has 1 engine for every 405 square miles. So you can't, almost can't put a per capita price per square mile, but it is something to be cognizant. It's something to absolutely think of.
Sure. I understand that the gentleman back here also has not had an opportunity. I will get to him, I promise.
Hi, I'm Steve Fulton. I'm the director. Can you hear me? Yeah. And this has, I'm good at this. The rates are gonna go up, they're gonna go down, whatever they're gonna do. Fire station should be here. Look at Chinese Camp. That's a volunteer fire department there. There was nobody there to man that. All they had to have was a fire truck, go around the outside of that town. I was on it. Was on the dozer. I was too late to save it. But if that was manned, their fire trucks could have went right on around that town. That town would not have burned. I saw that firsthand. Yeah. So whatever the rate's gonna do, it's gonna do. But if you people want to keep your houses, I'll think about it.
Went down to the county, get some numbers today regarding this issue. I served on the board for 9 years. By the way, I know these matters pretty well. First thing to do, the assessor looked up some numbers for me. Saw the wages for the general manager, Joe fell out of the chair, $250,000. Anyway, I'm gonna encourage y'all to project this plan based on what others have said, and I'm gonna say the same thing. We do not need 2 fire departments, 2 fire stations within 1.3 miles of each other. What GCSD is doing is subsidizing the rest of the county and the great revenue that we bring in due to the wealth of our community and the vacation rentals is being used by other people in town. It's not being set properly. Steve Griever should be on top of this. There is plenty of money in the reserve fund right now. Reject this plan and set up this committee, whatever the general manager says he can do, and we can revisit this thing. When I was on the board, we had volunteers, reservists on the fire department. They count just as much as a full timer. So the training that matters. Don't let them tell you we need just full timers. Just a jobs program for CAL FIRE. Now, I've traveled a lot in my younger years, and including the richest countries in the world, including Switzerland. You go to a village town this size in Switzerland, there will be 0 full-time firefighters. 0. We have excellent fire protection. Firefighters they have are all volunteers. They are all trained properly. And as far, there is an affordable solution to this. As far as worrying about whether wildfire is going to get us the best way to protect our community from wildfire is for the able-bodied men and women to stay here when the fire starts and put out those embers. It's been done many times, many places over history. It's not sophisticated. So please prevent this event.
Has anybody not asked a question yet? You have one here.
I've been a resident up here for full time for like 10 years and own property longer than that. Currently I'm paying with State Farm about $8,000 a year for property insurance. I don't know what everybody else here sees. I don't know if anybody's done an analysis, but if we don't fund this, I mean, we're talking like $400 to $500 a year It wouldn't surprise me at all, Merrick, I could almost guarantee it, if we don't do this, you're gonna end up paying into the insurance company. So where do you want your money to go?
Right, I'm going
The question I got for GCSD is, since a lot of the calls are for medical, why can we not use a two-person SWAT instead of sending an engine?
Steve, maybe more. Steve, Laura, sorry.
You absolutely could, but some other agencies have looked at that model. But that's not in the operational response model that we currently employ. Those are internal discussions we got at the county level and fire departments across California and Ohio. The Grapevine, Texas just voted to do exactly that. The problem with that is you're gonna utilize, or you're gonna hire 2 additional people to staff that smaller piece of equipment to respond, there's the cost. Or if you take them off the primary response engine and the thing you were traveling to or returning from, now you're caught without the toolbox. So that's something to look at. But yeah, it's a discussion that's being had, and everybody's trying to get creative how we can address the problem. Yes, does it always make sense to roll down the street with a $1 million fire truck to a lift assist? Likely not. But what's the cost of not being ready and having our own toolbox everything? That's what we can't quantify.
Okay, so we said that 218 can't really be used in the way that you were trying to use it. That it can't be used for fire or anything like that. So since you're using it, it's kind of confusing. Down at the bottom of your presentation there, it said that you could send in the normal 218 process of 50% of people filing written objections. And yet you never talked about that, you just talked about charging per property without even really explaining what it would be. Single family, this is not a city with houses right next to each other in your entire area. I don't understand, can we do both? I mean, can we send in a letter if we get 50% of the people, which your website says you serve 4,500. So if half of that sends in a letter, will that stop this and make you rethink how you're gonna do this?
Melanie?
Thank you for the question. Actually, the written protest is, we'll have specific directions on how you can protest. But it is not a, like a property related fee where you would send in a protest that if 50% over.
No, we're using 218.
We're using 218.
218 is just in that now.
For a property related fee. This is a benefit assessment. So in a property related fee, which is for water or sewer, you would send in a written protest, and it's 50% or more, sent in letters, then there would be a majority protest that would not go forward. However, this is not the process, this is the benefit assessment. In the benefit assessment, there is the process where we send out the property owner ballots, and property owners vote on it, and then we tally the ballots, and it's based on weighted average. Now, recently, back in 2025, there was an assembly bill passed, it was for the AB 2257. And that added that particular written protest procedure. So what that does is it gives the property owner to write their written protest. It gives them a specific date that they can send in the reply to the district. They can mail it, they can sign it for their specific procedures. And then the district would then have the opportunity to respond in writing. So that is something that was just added, like I said, was approved in 2025. It's an additional process, but it's actually not part of the process.
You're skipping around it by calling it something different.
No.
Are we going to get
some sort of breakdown of how you're gonna charge this before
Yes,
the next meeting?
so in the ballot,
No, not before the next meeting.
so the next meeting is May 14th. We mail the ballots May 7th. In the ballot, there has to be, before it processes to 18, there has to be a ballot notice. In that notice, it will specifically say everything that, the purposes of this is what, these funds are being paid for. It will give you the breakdown of all of the parcels, the specific categories of how they're being charged. It will give you information on that written objection process. It will give you the dates for the community meetings. It will give you the public, information on public, hearing. And it will also tell you how the ballots are calculated. So all of that information will be included.
From the last time, before we vote. Whether or not.
There's 40
this house on the same acreage, next door to this house on the same acreage. Is going to be charged differently because you decide this is a more expensive house.
No. For Proposition 218, it cannot be based on the assessed valuation of the home. That's for a bond measure. That's again something very different.
We have something about the cost.
Right, when we look at the, what we call single family equivalent, we look at the average structural replacement value. That is one component that is considered, but it is not. I think it's the average of all of the, those properties, like all single family homes in Groveland or in Groveland. We do not base the assessment on the assessed valuation of the property. It cannot be based on the assessed valuation of the property. If it was, that's why you have maybe an $8 million house that would be paying one rate, and it's a home for $200,000, you're paying a different rate. That is not how this works, and that's not how we do it based on property.
Alan's going to come describing why each property was charged differently from other properties in the same area.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, we're getting past 7:30. I'm gonna take a few more questions because I do have a couple things I want to touch upon before everybody leaves.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Pete one question, and that is, if this fails, could you describe what's left as far as fire suppression systems for Groveland is? What's left if this doesn't pass?
We have the ability to continue our operations at a true staffing until we get out into the early 27-28 fiscal year. And then we will not be able to continue that contract because we don't have the money to pay the next invoice. What happens from there is a public discussion.
Sure.
With that.
It means zero coverage?
Well, I mean, that isn't, we won't be able to contract with CAL FIRE at that point. I can't get into an advocacy discussion. All I can do is say, at this point, I can tell you that for true staffing, the way we are today, if we hit the budget numbers, we'll be out. We won't have the ability to continue to contract. CAL FIRE is not going to do it for free. We would have to terminate the contract, and then we'd have to figure out what went on from there.
Hey, Mike, maybe the easiest CAL FIRE, if GCSD were to close up shop in 2 years, the county has a legal obligation to provide fire service. So at what point the county would have to come in, have another meeting like this, and we would have to address what was gonna happen. So a point that Mr. Smith made in the back, sorry, Mike, that's to call you out, that fee might be a different rate, it might be the same as that you're seeing here, but that would be a discussion that Pete just said we'd have to do. As of right now, nothing is gonna change, they're still gonna operate. If this were to fail, you would still operate the way they're gonna do, the county would still operate the way we're gonna do, we're just gonna have to find a way to get to yes. Well.
Hi, I'm Joyce Fox, Southern Bay Area, love Groveland. But looking at your numbers here, why not increase the amount for the vacant lots? A lot of neglected vacant lots, reduce the price for the single family homes. It seemed like it would generate probably as much money, so a lot of empty lots. Not that would be a solution. At least increase for the people who live here and who are you know, they're buying things in the community, they're staying here in the community. Why not keep them here, having sell the area, you're gonna keep increasing pricing. I would think maybe you can increase $72 for empty lots, that's not the standard.
These were very, these numbers were not arbitrary numbers. We looked at statistics for Groveland, we looked at other, other statistics that we use. And Groveland has, I think it's like 4,160 apartments. And there's a specific number of vacant parcels. But we have to, again, look at the benefits of that parcel that is received. And even if we charge $1 more, $2 more, it's not gonna make that much difference for a single family home. There's not that many vacant parcels that are, for the amount of parcels that are in Groveland. But like I said, the one thing about the stock rating process is that it has to be a special benefit to the property.
It's a good question. If we're going to apply a certain criteria, a certain standard, a certain regulation to the single family, we have to apply that same standard to vacant parcels. So there's published reports that say on average a vacant parcel is this much demand, and so that's what's used.
Okay, so we're getting to the end of tonight's meeting. I want to first thank everybody for taking the time to come here tonight. It means a lot to us to see this kind of participation from the community. A couple of things I want to show you. The district itself has a dedicated website where you can literally find anything and everything that we've discussed. You can find the engineer's report. This presentation is going to be up there. Our future meeting dates, the fire master plan, response time standards, and the apparatus replacement schedule. One of the things I wanted to point out is this public transparency portal that we have implemented. It's very intuitive and it is updated monthly. So for example, you come to this page and you click there, we have all of our funds. For everybody who wants to see where every single dollar goes, you can literally do this from the convenience of your couch. You don't have to come into the district office. You don't have to put in a formal public records request. Here is just a little bit to navigate. So I'm under fire right now, and I'm under expenditures for 2026, and you can go back several years. You scroll down, we can have expenses. So you see expenses here. Click on more detail. This is a line by line item. On this far side is what the budgeted amount is. This right here is what the actual amount is. So as you can see, for those who can't see these categories, every single line item, here's the big one, the Schedule A right here. We break it into the OPEB and the pension, payroll wages that go part of that, utilities. So you can literally see, for people that want to know, where's the money going? This page will show you everything. It is updated monthly. You can dive that far down into the weeds. This is specific to fire, so this is the expenses. You can also go over to the revenue component. This page has been kind of uploading a little bit slow. But in addition to that, we don't have this internet and the resilience center. And that goes, I know we're talking about fire tonight, but that also goes for our water, sewer, and the parks. You can see monthly. We can see all the checks that are written monthly, where they're going to. It's extremely transparent for those who really want to dive that far down to see where the revenue is coming from and where all of the expenditures are going to. The last thing I wanted to touch upon was the additional 2 meetings that we're having. So we have a meeting coming up on May 14th and the second on June 18th. Both of these meetings are going to be held here at the Resilience Center, same time. If they're on Thursdays, and it's 5:30 to 7:30. These meetings are an opportunity to speak directly with district staff, ask questions about your ballot and assessment, and get the information you need. Our goal is to make sure every property owner feels informed and prepared when it's time to return their ballots. Like I said, we are here for you. We have a lot of resources online. When you walked in, you got this packet that was here tonight. If you scan this QR code, it's going to take you to another website that's specifically dedicated to the fire assessment. So like I said, we're here, we're gonna have a couple more meetings. Anything that you can't find, I mean, you should be able to find most of it on our website. We have a ton of resources. But yeah, so again, thank you everybody for coming this evening. We really appreciate it. And hope you have a good evening.